Hello, welcome to Furious Driving, and today it's another in the ever-growing series of test driving my own cars. I think we're pushing double figures now, and today we are in Hippo, the Freelander, the TD4 Kalahari Mk1 from 2003. The Mk1 Freelander was initially fainted as the greatest small off-roader in the world, then mocked by serious off-roaders, and ultimately became the 8th vehicle enlisted into Land Rover's Heritage Hall of Fame, or whatever they're calling it. But before we begin, and before we even have our word from our sponsor, I need you to do me a favour. I need you to smash the like and, more importantly, subscribe buttons right now. I'm not going to start until you do. I'm waiting. You done it? Okay, let's get on with the video.
Proud to be sponsored by Diamond Bright, the car care products that have been keeping the Furious fleet looking their best for a long time already. To find all you need to keep your car clean and protected, follow the link below to diamondbright.co.uk.
Hello, welcome to Furious Driving, and yes, I'm hiding my microphone from the wind right now, and this is Hippo, my 2003 Series 1 Freelander. Yes, the Freelander is a soft-roader that actually had genuine go-anywhere credentials. I'm filming it in a field because it can. Not many of my other cars can do that. Let's take a look around this genuinely interesting and exciting piece of engineering. Okay, let's find somewhere a bit more sensible for doing a walk-around review than a very muddy field. But this does illustrate why this car was so good, because in the early 90s there were a number of very interesting and exciting new cars that were kind of called SUVs, and people didn't really know what they were. They were mild off-roaders that had a bit of go-anywhere capability but were still comfortable around a city. However, Land Rover, being Land Rover, wanted to do something, well, proper. So this has got hill descent control, it's got proper four-wheel drive through its viscous coupling unit in the middle, which is a liquid-filled pipe which transmits power to the rear of the car. I'm hoping there's somewhere I can turn around down here. So it was genuinely different and genuinely exciting. It may not have been as good off-road as genuine Land Rovers, as some of the more hardcore Land Rover folk would call it. A girl lander, a soft roader. But compared to, say, little Honda, it was very capable indeed. So this, the L314 Land Rover Freelander, first appeared in 1997. It was an interesting project made possible by BAE buying the Rover group, including Land Rover, for 150 million in 1988, and suddenly funds were available to do stuff, and also they could combine the technology of the companies a bit more freely. And it actually emerged from a Rover four-wheel drive MPV project, which was canned and shelved. Land Rover, looking at the interesting things coming from Japan, such as the Toyota RAV4, were thinking we could do with a small SUV to make us a bit of money. There's an emerging market there. So they took a Honda Shuttle four-wheel drive mule out of storage and did some test runs to evaluate it around their test track, and decided there was some mileage in this project. Under development, it was codenamed Pathfinder, or CB40 for Canley Building 40, where they were doing the research work. And honestly, they could not have got their product and their timing better, because this went on to become Europe's biggest selling four-wheel drive car for about 5 years in a row. Now, by modern eyes, we think of this as a fairly compact 4x4, a small car almost, but the fact is it's almost as big as the original Range Rover, and it's actually got a 2.5 centimetre longer wheelbase, and that is a good thing, not only for on-road handling but also for off-road capability, because it's a proper Land Rover. This is a really good off-roader. It may not have locking differentials, but it's got a good ground clearance, it's got good departure angles for going up steep hills, it's got a good wading depth of like 60 centimetres or so it can tackle Rufford Ford if it wants to. Yeah, it's a proper Land Rover. It was marketed by Land Rover as a premium compact SUV, or a premium compact 4x4, but it's Land Rover's first ever monocoque chassis vehicle. After 50 odd years of only building body-on frame cars, the Discovery, the Range Rover, the Defender, the 101s, all those kind of things. Incidentally, this does have a 101-inch wheelbase as well, curiously. They were finally brought kicking and screaming into the 20th century with a monocoque shell. It was also something of a masterstroke in terms of design from Jerry McGovern, their designer, who went on to become the head of Land Rover design. So what we have here is the 5-door station wagon, but there was also a 3-door. It just had the 2 front doors, slightly longer, and then a diagonal slash from here down to the back corner, and that was fitted with a removable hardtop which could be replaced with a soft top or vice versa. In practice, very few owners actually bothered to do that, but the option was always there, and the idea, the seed of the idea was there. So you're thinking, well, I've got a hard top for winter, but you know, come summertime I can put the soft top on and I can have the roof down on my Land Rover. How cool is that? And because of, or partly because of that, the tailgate glass drops into the back door, so the back of the car could be completely open. But it's got a lot of genuine Land Rover styling tropes in there as well. For example, these barrel-topped wings and doors are just like on a Defender. You've got stepped roof like on a Discovery. Lots of themes that you can see in other vehicles. And to make it a practical, sensible off-road car, it's got unpainted plastic bumpers so you can bash things into stuff if you need to. It's also got plastic cladding all around the edges too, and plastic front wings, so it'll shrug off a minor knock if you need to. And the Land Rover official accessory catalogue wasn't just things like extra comfortable floor mats. You could buy bull bars, spot lamps, a snorkel, side accessories, and a massive industry grew up all around these things of all the accessories that you could want to go proper off-roading. Underbody protection, sill guards or rock sliders as you would call them in America. And then you have these roof bars, standard roof bars here on the 5-door. On the 3-door it was an optional cage that went all the way around the back, and these things are very, very strong indeed. They're rated to carry 75 kilos on the road, but that's more to do with top heaviness. But when you're parked up, these are very, very strong indeed. You can even go camping on top of these. Ask me how I know. So let's take a look around the front of Hippo. Okay, big door handle, good sized door, although the 3-door car, the door is quite a bit longer, typical of all 3-door cars, but it's not a bad thing to climb into. Looking at the door card, so we've got fabric at the top, big door speaker there, tweeter just there, plastic door handle, solid plastic grip, bigger door pocket than we had in the first one, quite a sizable door bin, which now has cup holders, which the original version didn't do. These are actually a bit of a trick and a faff because they're spring loaded, which means actually taking things in and out of them can be a bit of a nightmare. Seats are quite comfortable. They're comfort rather than sporting, but they are quite buckety and do hold you quite well. Not electric, even though this is a Kalahari, which is a fairly high spec model. Climbing aboard, we have the T-shelf of dreams. First of all, we've got our higher level here, which blows air onto the windows. We've got our Rover parts bin clock here in the centre, and interestingly how it goes up after the dash top itself, there's a higher section still, so the scuttle raises beyond our T-shelf area. And this is a brilliantly practical T-shelf. Got a big rubber centre section which is big enough to put a cafetiere and a mug, so if you're having a tea break you can really go for it in style. Got a little rubber area here, so it doesn't matter if you're putting dirty grubby food and drink things in there. Another small one down here, and these all lift out as well, so you can actually take them indoors and wash them if you do get them dirty, muddy, whatever else when you're out and about. The car is insanely practical. Big chunky separate instrument binnacle, which looks like it can be replaced in this section of the dashboard over here as well for ease of manufacture. Airbag on the passenger side as well as the driver's side, which is good. Ahead of us we've got our fairly simple instrument binnacle, which is basically just fuel gauge, rev counter, speedo and temperature, and a bunch of warning lights down the bottom. This car has actually done 113,000 miles, and it being an automatic tells you whether you're in park, drive or reverse. Now moving back from there, we have got a nice leather steering wheel with an interestingly sculpted centre section, got an airbag in it, perforated leather on the left, feels quite sporting actually, and we've even got radio controls here on the left hand side. Horn, a muddy parp. And then between the steering wheel and the instruments we've got our stalks, lights and indicators here on the left and wipers on the right. Now we have actually got a few extra controls down here on the side, rear wiper and rear washer on the right hand side, and we've got our rear fog here on the left. I guess this is a front fog if you have the optional front fog light pods attached. We do have excellent ventilation. We've got multiple of these big air vents around the dashboard all across in a straight line. And we've got our electric mirrors, which do also fold in, which is nice. I think they're heated as well. We've got an extra little cubby down here, again rubber lined so things don't rattle and don't fall out, just for stashing bits and bobs, chocolate bars and the like. And down underneath here we've got a secret hidden mini glove box T-shelf thing. You can tell I've been driving this car in the pandemic, which has got a couple of cup holders, so you can have your cup of tea down there, instant tea shelf, or you can stash your documents for the car in there. There's even a little hidden cubby area just there, so if you need to hide stuff away, this car can conceal it. A bit like on a Rover P6 really, although it didn't have cup holders. On the left hand side we've got more of the air vents. We've got another little hidden cubby hole just down there for stashing keys and phones and oddments. We've got a proper glove box, which isn't actually much bigger than the pretend one. 2 more cup holders, so you can have about 9 cups of tea on the go in this car if you're out and about for the day. Lots of napkins. Is a car even a car without napkins? And we've got the original Land Rover radio just here in the centre. Now this is fairly basic radio cassette. It do have steering wheel controls, but it's really just nothing more than FM medium wave radio and a tape player. But it does have 6 speakers, so it doesn't sound too bad. Underneath that we've got big chunky buttons for everything. Rear screen heater, whatever that would be, air recirc, air conditioning, which is fantastic, and our simple, and I think probably sourced straight from the Rover parts bin, heating and ventilation controls. Under that things get a little bit more interesting actually, because we have got, here we have our tailgate window winder, so up and down window, so you can fully open that back window if you want to when you're on the move or parked up for the day. Very, very nice indeed. Central locking, and this is our electric sunroof, which incredibly even works. Finally, we have the blanking switches where if we were lucky enough to have heated seats, that's so there would be. A tiny, tiny cubby hole under the ashtray, which is just big enough for next to nothing. 12-volt socket. And then the gear shift. This one is an automatic with the Jacko gearbox. Never mind. And this is the important button, one of the most important things that made Land Rover so valuable to BMW. The hill descent control button. This is quite a remarkable piece of technology, a patented Land Rover thing, which obviously BMW owning Land Rover helped themselves for the X5. Then we've got an actual proper handbrake down here, which is good. Then we've got our 4 electric window switches and a rear switch lockout. Under that, and behind that, a big old cubby thing, which has got a useful rubber storage area, which is just the right size for an iPhone in the top of it. You can replace this with a leather one if you want. I have got a leather one, which I might switch it out for one day, but I do quite like the practicality of this little rubber top thing. Also quite a good size cubby in there, so you can put another cup in there if you want to, or a flask. Get your soup in there while you tease elsewhere. And all in all, very practical indeed. And you can have rubber mats. You could have chosen carpet mats from the dealer, but a really popular option with these things was the rubber floor mats, which means if you actually used your Freelander for walking the dog, going shooting, working on a farm, you didn't ruin your carpets. Really, really nice option, which does link it properly with its Land Rover heritage. Okay, climbing into the back of the car. Now you'll notice we've got this full black plastic cladding all around the car for shrugging off dents, but also goes all the way around the door itself. Big flush door handles. And we've got a rear quarter light here, which I think means the window will go all the way into the door, or at least nearly all the way. Not the hugest of huge door apertures, but quite easy to climb through nonetheless. And then we have a fairly upright sitting position. The seats are fairly comfortable. It feels quite nice in here actually, and the thing you'll notice is it's got the grandstand seating position. You also notice we are sitting quite a lot higher up here in the back than the people in the front, so we've got this view over the top of their heads, which is great for not feeling car sick and making the thing feel a lot more spacious and airy than it actually is. The roofline does actually step up on the outside, and in the that's coming away. A bit of glue on that, typical Rover / Range Rover trait. So it's more like a Range Rover in many ways. Here in the back we have got our own courtesy light, and we've also got these luggage nets here in the front of the ceiling. When I saw these, I did say, it's a great idea, but I guarantee they'll never get used. First time we went out in the car, my son put his Nintendo in there, and so they are actually quite useful. We've got grab handles with coat hooks, we've got electric windows, we've got big speakers, back of the seat pockets. This tray in the centre cubby is actually quite handy for the rear passengers as well. Also, as well as the ashtray, we've got a 12-volt socket, and this is not massively common in the 90s to have a 12-volt socket in the back of a car, so quite surprising. Also, an absolute ton of legroom. Considering it's not thought of as a big car, there is a load of space in this thing. It feels really spacious and very comfortable. This is the Kalahari, so we've got half leather, half Alcantara, which looks quite a bit better in the back because it's been used so much less. Okie dokie, let's look around the boot of the car. There's a few interesting pointers to look around at the back before we get in. First of all, we've got our spare wheel mounted on the tailgate in the traditional style of old off-roaders like the Defender and the series cars, just to give it more space inside the car, give it easy access if you are off-roading, and to give it just that general tie-in to everything that makes it a Land Rover. Secondly, we've got our high-mounted third brake light, which is on a little arm which pops out from above the spare wheel. It's also got the Land Rover logo emblazoned in its lens. It's quite a cool little piece of design just there. I rather like that. It means it's visible even when this drop glass is dropped all the way into the door, and it's not protruding above the level of this metal tailgate area. So if you want to put long heavy loads out of the back of the car, well, it's still going to be in the way, but you know, it's just differently in the way. Now, because we've got the spare wheel on the right hand side, we've got an off-centre asymmetrical number plate, as in the style of the Discovery, and it's a real Land Rover trait to do this, and they've really gone a bit off kilter with the latest Discovery 4s with that kind of wacky full width long thin number plate, but still off centre. It doesn't really work. This one works incredibly well. This is also your door handle. Before I open that, I also mention we've got a really cool Freelander logo with the kind of handwritten freestyle script along the bottom. I think it's meant to look tribal or something to make the car look like you are going across the actual Kalahari, like this car is named after. I've just noticed for the first time ever it's got a little trademark logo after it. I'd never seen that before. Yes, this one is a TD4 because it's a TD4. And finally, on the outside, we've got exposed little Allen key heads on the lamps up here and down here in the bumper. The main lights are also down here in the bumper because it means when the door is open on the back of the car, because it's a side opening door, that they're not going to be blocked by the spare wheel. It also means that you can screw light protectors into those really easily if you want to do the full off-roading look. Now when you do pull that door handle, the door glass drops into the tailgate, so it does seal fully. Really practical boot actually. It's a fairly large sized boot, but it does set the mould for SUVs of the future in that the boot is taller rather than longer, but this is actually very, very practical indeed. We've got a huge door bin in the door itself. It's ideal for dog balls. This has been a dog car for the last few owners, and indeed we use it as a dog car as well, so there's lots of fur and mud in the back of that carpet. This is a fairly large space. We have got lash downs in here, and being a practical Land Rover, virtually a farm vehicle in some respects, a posh farm vehicle if you like, you can buy all these rubber floor mats. This one lifts up, and underneath here, we have a secret locker with a key in it. Let's put a key in there and see what it reveals. Well, this is a little stash hole that you can hide away. Well, first of all, your wheel brace and jack live in here out of the way, so it keeps your boot nice and clear. Then you've got a fairly good sized hole for hiding wallets and valuables when you're away from the car, and you can lock that so it's hard to break into. You also get a lot deeper on the left hand side, incidentally. I'm not quite sure why that would be, to do with the pressing of the floor, but it's big enough even to put a gas stove in there, so this is very much an outdoor car, isn't it? Now you might be surprised that I like a car like this, because I'm on record as not really liking SUVs very much, thinking they're pointless jacked up hatchbacks. And that's because the current generation to a large extent is a lot of jacked up, overblown, oversized hatchbacks with smaller, less practical interiors than the hatchbacks they're based on. But this has very little to virtually nothing in common with a hatchback. This feels more like the Land Rovers it was designed to be a softer version of. So on the road, the ride and handling is quite poor. It does lollop and roll around quite a lot. With bigger wheels fitted like 17 inches, which were an option, you really do feel them out on the end of the suspension, bouncing and boinging around. This car has got smaller wheels, but with very big tyres and off-roady tread, and well, this is not a great example to judge by, because you can hear that tread all the time. On an early video of this car, someone actually said they thought I had a wheel bearing going. No, it's just a monstrous tread. So really, this is nothing at all like the current generation of SUV, which is really just a hatchback which is riding a bit taller. This is a proper off-roader that happens to be quite comfortable on-road. Now, because it was designed to be a proper off-roader, it has got independent McPherson strut suspension all around. It's got anti-roll bar on the back, it's got discs on the front and drums on the rear. So reading that little bit of spec in isolation, you might imagine it's some kind of 1980s or 90s sports car, but no, here it is, it's an off-roader. There were 4 engines offered in total. There was the 1.8 K series, the 4-cylinder petrol, which is renowned for its, well, head gasket issues. Then there were the diesels. Initially there was the L series, which is a venerable if chugging old thing from the Austin Rover stable, but the diesel of choice is this one, the M47 BMW 2 litre, which is a far more refined thing. Well, interestingly, when it's in the 3 Series and the 5 Series, it sounds quite smooth and fairly refined. In here, I don't know if it's to do with the engine map or the exhaust or the sound isolation from the cabin, but it has a certain chugging quality, which makes the thing feel and sound more truck-like, more farm-like. It kind of puts it in character for the vehicle. It's really interesting. Finally, of course, there was the KV6, Rover's V6 K series. It gave the ultimate performance, but that was combined with the ultimate running costs, and don't even talk about the MPG. That was only available with an automatic. That would be the Jatco, which is shared with this car, but manual options were available on all of the others, which were the PG1 Rover gearbox. Now, I had been thinking about buying myself a Series 1 Freelander for quite some time. What I really wanted was a 3-door early car with the mad colour schemes, because the first ones came with these bizarre green and grey and blue combinations, which were very, very Fisher Price, very brave and bold, very 1990s, let's face it. And the 1990s is one of the best decades. I wanted a 3-door, and I wanted a K series, and I wanted a manual. However, this car turned up by accident when I was selling Quentin the convertible, and it came as a part exchange. It's the wrong number of doors, it's the wrong engine and the wrong gearbox. Now, I decided to stick with it because 5 doors is more practical as a family car. The diesel is supposedly the most reliable of all the engines, and the automatic is apparently less trouble than the PG1 and its notorious linkage. So far, only the gearbox is broken, which is alright. Which brings me on quickly to reliability, which has not been a Land Rover's strong suit for many years, if ever, frankly. Maybe back in the early days they were okay. If you name a component on this car, it will probably break. The window regulators have a habit of just snarling up, and so replacing window regulators on a car, if you buy one, is probably a given. The rear doors not unlocking on the central locking, common problem. The viscous coupling failing and being a ridiculously expensive repair, very common failing. If you go through the classifiers looking for one of these, more likely than not you will find them listed as 2-wheel drive, and that's because the viscous coupling or the reduction unit in the front has failed, and it was cheaper to just take it out and run it as a front-wheel drive car. Rust, however, doesn't seem to be much of a problem with these, no worse than any other car which is pushing 25 years old. Now this 110 horsepower TD4 is probably the best of the bunch because it gives okay performance, 0 to 60 in about 14 seconds, and I've never timed it, but it does feel that way. It's fairly brisk up to about 30 or 40 though, so in traffic it's decent. Top speed's 102 if you're brave enough. Best of all, it will return around 37 mpg, and again, I've never timed it, but certainly on a long trip it does feel like it's getting about 40 to the gallon, which in a vehicle which is shaped after a shed is no mean feat. As I joked at the beginning of the road test section, the handling isn't all that. It is very, very roly-poly, but it does pass the elk test and it does grip pretty well. I mean, your passengers might be panicking a little bit if you go through a slalom course, but it will stay upright and will go more or less where you point it. There's not too much wind noise in the cabin, and being up high you have amazing visibility. The command driving position is what Land Rover always used to advertise with the Range Rover. And the advertising with this car was an absolute masterstroke. This is possibly why the SUV phenomena has happened, because the advertising for this car painted it as a go anywhere, do anything luxury car. You can drive around the city and then go across a desert. The adverts with the hippos in the water, brilliant. It gave the impression and painted the picture of a car you could use in any scenario whatsoever, and it would get you out of there happily, whether it was going to the opera or going to the jungle. This was a car that was going to sort you out. But it was an easy sell, to be honest. It's a great looking car. It's nicely proportioned. It's got those great Land Rover traits that give it a sturdy, chunky look. At the same time, it's got kind of a friendly, smiley face. It's like a Mini. You can't not like a Mini when you look at it. And unlike a lot of Jerry McGovern's more recent Land Rovers, which, well, they're just too nice. They're too shiny and polished, too fancy. you wouldn't want to take them off-road. Even the Defender looks too nice to take near mud. This car is like a puppy that just wants to go and roll in a muddy puddle. Normally when I take a car out for a review, I'll make sure it's clean and shiny. This one I hadn't bothered washing and then drove it through a field, and it looks perfect for it. I mean, it looks great when it is shiny, but it doesn't stay clean for long. Now, although this isn't my main family car, it is one I do use quite a lot because, well, everyone likes it. There is a really nice, endearing quality to this car that kids and adults alike want to be in. It feels like a Tonka toy. The 1.8K series, although it's basically the same engine in my 145 horsepower 200 VI, is only 120, but that does give surprisingly brisk performance. As you drive around, you will still see an awful lot of Mk1 Freelanders, either pre and post facelift, and they replaced it in 2006 with a new model, which you still see lots of those as well of. However, it's testament to how well they were built, because although they do have plenty of niggles, they do fundamentally just keep on going. And a lot of those cars are tatty and battered and just being used and abused by people who want like a go-anywhere van. But also, it's testament to the amount of the things they built, 537,000 of them over those 8 years. Which for a small company like Land Rover is a big amount of cars. And although the KV6 was kind of intended for the American and Middle Eastern markets, there was also a commercial version. You could buy it with panelled out back end and no back seats, a bit like the electric Zoe I had for a couple of months, which meant that businesses could use it. They did the same thing with the Discovery as well. Very handy tax break if you only need 2 seats. Now, they facelifted the car in 2004, gave it slightly different bumpers and lights and a few other tweaks on the interior. But to me, the original cars are the best looking, and to a certain extent I prefer the earliest ones of all. But those, as is common with a lot of cars, are the least reliable and the most breakable. So something like this, a late pre-facelift car, is kind of the best of all worlds, and for me there is a certain amount of nostalgia driving this car, because back in 2002, after my Alfa 146 was hit by a truck, I actually bought one of these things. I'm going to say brand new, it was brand new, but it was a dealer registered car, so I got a massive discount on the thing. But that was kind of my dream Freelander, if you like. It was a 3-door hardtop 1.8 manual, but it had a bunch of extras thrown on by the dealer. It had Vortex 17-inch wheels, metallic dark blue paint, the roof bars on the back of it, which looked really cool. And I added the light guards, which just made it look so good. And that was a 52 plate car. But typical SUV problem, the boot is very tall, but not very big, so it wasn't ideal for carrying my lights and things around. And also with the 1.8, I was really noticing the fuel economy not being good doing a lot of motorway miles. And bizarrely, it had a head gasket failure just as it came up to 3 years, but it's done under warranty thankfully. And the PG1's gear linkage was so bad that I couldn't get it into first gear without actually going from 5th to 4th, 3rd to 2nd to 1st. So yeah, as soon as the warranty ran out on that car, sadly I had to get rid of it and bought another Alfa. Now, if you're a regular viewer, you might be wondering, do I prefer the automatic gearbox in this car to the one in the Mercedes? And the answer is not really, no, because it does that kind of stuff. When it's cold, it hangs onto gears for absolutely ever to about 9,000 RPM, and apparently that's a fairly common fault. And it does just sometimes just joltingly change without warning. It's better since I changed the solenoid in it, but it's still not brilliant. Well, thank you for joining me in this ride out in this brilliant old Series 1 Freelander, a car that's rapidly becoming a modern classic in its own right. And although objectively it's not brilliant to drive, it's just so much fun just waddling around and wobbling from corner to corner, chugging around, well, admittedly quite slowly, but it just puts a smile on your face every time despite all of its shortcomings. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please, as always, like and subscribe, and join me again next time driving something completely different.